All right, ladies and gentlemen, how you guys doing on this Tuesday, February 1st, 2022, into the second month of 2022 already, hard to believe. Thank you for joining me here tonight for another Metallic episode of Music of Destruction, bringing you the very best in metal-related content right here on YouTube on the only metal channel you need. If you missed anything in the past week, click the eye in the upper right corner, should be popping up. Bring down the menu. Everything you need to get caught up on all the latest content is there. I'd really appreciate it. Reviews, if you want me to do them, make suggestions in the comment section. Slam, deathcore, metalcore, modern tech death. Remember, subscribe and turn on that bell so you don't miss anything. You're looking at one of the hardest working metal channels on the platform. No one's going to give it to you as upfront, honest, opinionated, and controversial as myself. I want to welcome you guys to Album Review Tuesdays here on the channel. Now tonight, we're going deep beneath the earth into Alhambra, California, for a look at one of my favorite USBM bands with Xasthur's All Reflections Drained. Now, All Reflections Drained was released in 2009 on Hydra Head Records, and this might be a less than favorable label for some people for a band to produce black metal on. I find them to be kind of hit or miss with the bands that they do produce, but there is some good stuff on there, Xasthur being one of them in his later years. Now, I have the A5 Digipack with the bonus disc that contains extra material. However, for pacing purposes, I'm only reviewing disc 1, which contains 8 tracks and clocks in at just over 56 minutes, which is a bit smaller duration in length than some of his other albums, of course. Now, Xasthur consists solely of Malefic, but Mark Hunter does help out with vocals and piano work and ambient sections on this album as well. One thing I'm going to say right off the bat here is that if you listen to bands like Dark Funeral, Dimmu Borgir, or Marduk, which I happen to love, not Dark Funeral or Dimmu Borgir, they can fuck off. But this album is highly unlikely to be for you if you love any of the bands that I mentioned, because what we have here is 56 minutes of pure agony and despair mixed with utter misanthropic obsession, with far little regard for what your sensibilities are in terms of what you consider metal, okay? Now, there's very little on this record that is considered metal, and it has far more in common with dark ambient and drone and chamber music than anything else. Yes, black metal is still the framework and aesthetic, but the actual metallic elements are a lot less profound here on this album than his previous works, and I find that to be a good thing. Not that I didn't like it when it was way more black metal, but I like the way that he just kind of progressed into what he is now. No, not right now, but on this album. I don't mean modern Xasthur, because I can't really get into his Doomgrass stuff, though I highly respect what he's doing. Alright, so let's get into it, shall we? So the album opens up with Dirge Forsaken, and the doom-laden churning guitars proceed to pull you downward into an endless sea of misery and funereal blackness, guys. Now, this is also a track that is completely devoid of vocals, so the music itself is really all that's needed here to render you isolated and cold. At least it did for me. Now, maybe you like having vocals in your black metal, but I really love the way that this just brought everything together in terms of atmosphere. I will also say that him using real drums on this album adds a lot of diversity and depth to the record, but I wonder if using the drum machine would have been more effective in terms of otherworldly and the anti-human aesthetic that he is so obsessed with creating in his music, because it gave his music a much more inhuman feel. Now, however, the added use of a deeper ambient direction on this track feels like a steel blade across the throat, and perhaps a mirror staring back that's shattered but reflecting your cold, empty shell. This is a great opener and has more in common for me with doom metal than it does with black metal. Now, next up we have Maze of Oppression, and this is a very compelling track, both for its hypnotic gaze into the cold abyss that Malefic has crafted, but also in its compositional framework, given that it is less metal and more straightforward chamber music that feels like a call out to be forgotten and left to die. The drum work is simplistic here, but very effective, as the dissonance and melancholy both in the guitar work and the sparse use of vocals make their appearance. It does add a great deal of depth and atmosphere to it as well. Now, what I find really interesting about the direction of this album is how he kept moving further away from metal and more toward darker ambient and dark classical compositions. This track really begins to emphasize these ideas and concepts. Of course, one of the most mentally disturbing parts I find of the track is the closing 3 minutes, where a haunting piano melody is repeated throughout, with some really dark ambience and hissing vocals that give it an unsettling presence. This is a great track as well. Next up, we have Achieve Emptiness Part 2. And if you guys remember Part 1 from the Xasthur Leviathan split, then you'll recall how creepy and downright otherworldly that instrumental piece was. Well, here on Part 2, it's a different approach and feeling, though no less depressing or dark, when its main difference is the use of drums and guitar work, but it certainly feels like a natural progression of Part 1 and where it left off in terms of atmosphere and expressionism. Now, some people might say, well, why does everything on this record sound so familiar? Well, if you have to remember that Xasthur's music has always had a similar theme. You can tell when you're listening to Xasthur if you were to put on a record, and this album is no different. But the ultimate goal of this music, obviously, you guys, is emotional expression and, of course, atmosphere, where creating a constant theme is essential, especially in the case of depressive black metal and dark ambient. Now, this album feels like a combination of both, but what sets it apart is Malefic's ability to paint sounds with his mind and rage and agony, and you certainly can feel every bit of it on here. Again, no vocals are present, and the music speaks for itself. Great track. Next up is Masquerade of Incisions, and this is 15 minutes and 33 seconds of what can only be described as pure self-destruction and agonizing despair-fueled nothingness. This isn't an exercise of anger and rage, but rather it's self-loathing and the loathing of life itself that is the forefront of this monstrous piece of surrealistic, nightmarish dissonance and black coldness. Now, the way its dark, ethereal, cold clouds of lifeless decay set in on you through its 15-minute journey is spellbinding, mesmerizing as well to its fullest extent. Now, there are vocals on this track as well, but they're so otherworldly and black that they might as well be another instrument or not human at all. In fact, they sound like dead ghosts, obviously. Now, in a lot of ways for me, this is very similar to Nocturnal Poisoning, the track, and this feels like it's a part 2. And it definitely has a lot in common with it, right down to its surreal nocturnal atmosphere and soundscapes that bleed into dreamscape sections where nothing is comprehensible or real, as the ghosts of the dead have taken you to their world of purgatory and stillness. So guys, let's listen to some of Masquerade of Incisions here on Music of Destruction. Enjoy. And we're back, guys. This is easily my favorite track on the album and one of the most compelling pieces he's ever written. This is a great track. Next up is Damage Your Soul, and as if Masquerade of Incisions didn't do enough damage and further you into its descent of hopeless abandon, along comes this track. Now, while it's not as lengthy as the previous effort, it is, however, very effective and excellent at portraying its goal of destroying your soul, and this is really, really dark stuff. It's definitely the most metal song on the album, albeit depressive down-tempo black metal, with a strong emphasis once again on atmosphere and hypnotic dirges of ambience that create pain, despair, and misery, engulfed into hatred and self-destruction. Nuances of seasick highs and lows that echo through your speakers come through very effectively at unwavering lengths and effectiveness. This is a great track as well. Next up, we have the 7-minute epic called Inner Sanctum Surveillance. And this is some incredibly bleak, gray, ruined landscapes that have manifested through your consciousness that compel you and toy with your sanity as self-reflection sets in and you realize the futility of existence. And that's truly where this goes, okay? There's nothing in Malefic's world that represents life or happiness, and he creates this urban, bleak blackness with such efficacy that one will question their own sanity and why they're alive. I'm sure that's what Malefic was going for on this record. Now, this is a bit of a slower track, and definitely right up there with Otherworldly, Ethereal, and The Dead. Okay, this is absolutely incredible. And the way that he can craft these dimensions of blackness and nothingness is astounding, as if he knows the layers and rings of purgatory, and this track is incredible and one of my favorites. Next up, we have Obfuscated in Oblivion, okay? And this one sounds like the black abyss of the infinite void is opening up to devour you and moves swiftly through your soul, trapping you inevitably, unable to move from the woe and misanthropic suicidal push to the Nile. The guitars and drums on this track combine to create a sort of chaotic serenity that instills both fear and calmness and anger all at the same time. And as it slows in tempo from its panic-stricken, anxiety-fueled, dementia twists and turns, it does have various corridors of dimly lit caverns and archaic, ethereal ruins and chambers of madness deep within its labyrinth of confusion and misery that are all drenched in walls of hatred and dissonance and self-loathing. This is an excellent track as well. Closing out the album is All Reflections Drained, and this is the end, the final destination, the bottom of the abyss that the album has sunk you into. There's nothing here, guys, and I mean literally nothing. And I don't mean that in terms of music. What I mean is in terms of being nihilistically and supernaturally dead. This one is hard to listen to because of the soft-spoken whimpers and agonizing atmosphere that literally chokes you emotionally and spiritually. It's as if these supernatural beings that are obviously present all throughout the record are hearkening out and speaking to us. That's what it sounds like to me. Then the only thing they want you to know is obviously pain and misery while they were living, and perhaps offering an olive branch of relief, letting you know that there's nothing to fear on the other side, and that's what this song and album really emphasizes and embodies. The atmosphere is unreal and surreal simultaneously. Now, Malefic did a hell of a job on this record, and this is definitely the album he should have ended the black metal era of Xasthur on. The final verdict for All Reflections Drained is getting a 9 out of 10. This is killer stuff, and any Xasthur fan should want to get their hands on this one. You can go to Hydra Head Records. They may still have copies. Alright, so there you have it. Another album review in the books here on Music of Destruction. Hope you enjoyed the premiere. If you're new, subscribe, turn on that notification bell. teespring.com/music-of-destruction for merch there. Bonfire.com/store/music-of-destruction for new merch. Going to be putting up some more. Check it out. I'd really appreciate it. The Seed episode 35, The History of Cryptopsy, is up on Patreon. Working on The Seed episode number 36. Still need some ideas. If you guys want to give me some in the comment section or on the community tab, let me know what you'd like to see me cover. Patreon.com/music-of-destruction. Pick the $5 tier. You'll get access for life. Thank you very much for watching tonight. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video. We'll see you for Album Ranking Wednesdays. Cheers. See you in the next video. Have a great night.